Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. If you're in India or in the Asian part of the world, or if you're joining from Europe, good morning and welcome to the third part of our Next Step panel series. A couple of weeks ago, we covered the topic, the end of the degree as we know it. Really looking at if the degree provided everything someone needed for the remainder of their career. And I guess the conclusion of some of the takeaways of that event were that, you needed to continue to learn, which really segued into our second event, which was meeting industry demands of tomorrow today, which really showed that as the demands of industry were changing at ever increasing rate, and with some real fundamental changes in terms of the TVET sector, Industry 4.0, and a lot of the automation that is expected over the next 5 to 10 years, that role of lifelong learning was something that was probably more relevant than ever as we enter the next few years. Today, I'm joined by 4 wonderful panelists covering everything from training through to global perspectives, industry demands, and also educational institute. So what I'd like to do first of all is just go around to each of our panelists. Firstly, thank you for joining us all today. And if you could all do a short introduction, and maybe we could start with you, Holger. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Yeah, my name is Holger Offermans, and I'm Global Head of Digital at TÜV Rheinland Academy. I'm located in Germany right now. I'm sitting at home. Our offices are closed right now. Probably that is true for some of you as well. So in general, TÜV Rheinland is a TIC service provider originated in Germany back already in 1872. So we've come a long way, and we are now located in more than 50 countries around the globe. We have 5 business streams, and one of those is Academy and Life Care, and we focus on workforce education, personal certification, as well as occupational health and safety training and HR development. So we have about 150 academy locations worldwide in I think right now 26 countries, and I'm focusing on the digital solutions for our customers, trend scouting and consulting, and I'm happy to join this round. And yeah, let's see what we can discuss today. I'm excited.
Thanks very much, Holger. And always amazes me the TÜV Rheinland is one of the oldest companies that I think we ever get when we do the panel discussions. And also great to hear that your digital skills perspective. One of the things we discussed last week was really the relevance and how important it is to have a core digital skill set, and whichever kind of particular industry you're working in. So looking forward to hearing all around that. Mayuk, over to you. If you could do your intro, please.
Hi, thank you, Mike, and thank you all the panelists and the participants for this session today. It's a privilege, of course, to be a part of this constellation of eminent presenters as well as speakers. My name is Mayuk Dasgupta. I am a part of the corporate HR team of Hindalco, working on the technical training. And you can see the logo behind me. Hindalco Technical University was formed 3 years back, and very unique of its kind, catering to the technical capacity building for our engineers across and the workmen. Hindalco needs no introduction. It's a metal powerhouse, 18 billion plus for the Aditya Birla Group. Quite happening in terms of recent acquisitions and a lot of business expansions. And our work is to instill technical training to the core of our process. Okay, and my role here is majorly to work with the operators, the workmen. That's a exciting area, and I have a passion for that for the last couple of years now. And I also work on bringing in digital solutions and technology-enabled solutions for our plant operators as well as our engineers, and design and ensure that the learning goes in perpetuity. So that's my role, and I'm equally excited as Olga mentioned. I look forward for an enthralling discussion today. Over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mayak. And as always, I'm always keen to get the perspective of industry. And I think a company as large as Aditya Birla and Hindalco, I think creating your own training institute highlights both advancement in terms of industry, but also maybe some of the gaps that exist from training institutes. The fact that it's had to go ahead and develop its own institute to ensure it's got a workforce today and tomorrow. So I think we can definitely cover that as well. Manish, if you could do your introduction, please.
Thank you, Mike. Pleasure to be here. My name is Manish Joshi, and I'm part of the UNESCO New Delhi education team. UNESCO, some of you may know, is the UN Agency for Education, Science and Culture. And the cluster office that I'm part of covers India and 5 other countries in the sub-region. And I'm, of course, working on technical and vocational education and higher education. The mandate of UNESCO covers, of course, the Sustainable Development Goal 4 when it comes to education primarily, which is very wide. It spans primary education and, of course, everything in between all the way to higher education. And with that mandate, of course, UNESCO tracks progress and works with member states to push policies to track how countries are doing in terms of achieving their progress, on education goals. So I'm very happy to be here. Mike, back to you.
Thanks very much, Manish. Looking forward to hearing all around that. And last, but by no means least, we have Arindam, who's the head of strategy from SchoolNet. So if you could do your intro, Arindam.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be part of this among this eminent panelists. Thanks for inviting me. So I represent an organization called SchoolNet India Limited, and I'm the head of strategy at SchoolNet. SchoolNet as an organization is a 2-decade-old organization that's focused on, as we fondly call it, education, employability, and employment. So as part of education, which is delivered through SchoolNet as the organization, we look at, in fact, we are aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, and we look at how do we ensure the learning outcomes across the education spectrum and learner segments. So we essentially focus on school education with both physical as well as digital solutions. So through our projects and interventions that are funded by governments, corporates, as well as through our digital solutions, we are present in more than 40,000 schools, impacting around 12 million learners and teachers all across the country. The second part of our organization, which is a subsidiary of SchoolNet, is LearnNet Skills Limited, which is also India's one of the largest TVET solution providers. We have a partnership with the National Skill Development Corporation of India, and we run around 200 institutes of vocational skills across the country and offer vocational trainings in more than 100 trades all across the country, again, through sponsorships across various segments. And the third piece, which is the employment piece, as I said, 3E's agenda, the employment piece, we do 2 things. A, we work with the industry directly in both skilling their workforce, and secondly, also in providing them solutions for enhancing their competitiveness. And of late, recently we have launched another initiative, which is a digitally led initiative for providing job discovery and upskilling services to blue-collar youth. So through all these initiatives, we reach out to almost 15 million students, youth, teachers all across the country through both physical footprints as well as digital solutions. So that's what, and I am kind of the head of strategy of all these three initiatives put together at the corporate office level. So that's about me and my organization.
Thanks very much, Arindam, and certainly a lot of similarities in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of Certif-ID, and really kind of take that from education right through to employment and support people on that journey, both at the start of their career and as they continue to develop, and support them on that learning journey. And maybe it's a good place to start with you, Arindam, in terms of the kind of first question that we have today, and just starting with a little bit of background. So the Commonwealth Treasury intergenerational report, forecast that people are working well into their 70s or even 80s. And so the 50 or 60 year career is not only longer, but it's also much more fluid. We've already spoken in some of the previous series about digital transformation, and also the aging population. And it's triggering a host of future need skills. A universal education, as we touched on in part one, at the beginning of your life will no longer suffice and take you through that career. So, basically the idea, the hot topic, if you want, in terms of lifelong learning as an endeavor for individuals at every stage of their career. So a good place to really start with you, Arindam, in terms of how can educational institutes be involved in promoting that lifelong learning, and what kind of, would you say, different approaches should be taken?
Thank you, Mike. This is, I think, a very important question. So I would like to take this question in two parts. One is the need for lifelong learning, and the second part, as you said, as to how educational institutions can actually promote the concept of lifelong learning. The need for lifelong learning is well understood. And lifelong learning as a concept is not something which is developed in modern times, but it probably precedes modern times. In ancient cultures also, there has been learning as a way of life, which has been there. So here, essentially, I think in today's context, we're talking of learning to face the challenges of an ever-changing world of work. And today, the pace at which the world of work is changing is much faster. And therefore, there is need to have skills, do the job at hand, and that will continue throughout one's career. So a university degree is probably not the end of it, but probably it is just a passport to enter the world of work. And then you have to constantly learn and upskill and reskill yourself to be able to adapt to this changing, the world of work. And I'm sorry, I think this piece, I would also like to draw a personal example over here before I get into the specific question as to how educational institutes can solve it, is I have been trained as an architect and city planner. My education qualification, I did Bachelor's of Architecture, and then I did Master of City Planning from IIT Kharagpur. My initial work was in the area of city planning, where I was involved in the planning of new cities, Naya Raipur, new capital of Chhattisgarh, to existing cities, etc. From there to the current role that I am doing in the industry is no longer planning cities, but actually planning strategy in an education and skilling organization, incubating businesses or initiatives. And that's to a large extent, a large expanse that one would have covered, from a technical role to a more general role, to from incubating, creating cities, designing cities and buildings, to designing organizations, institutions, culture. So probably when my organization picked me up for this particular role, they might have seen that there are certain transferable skills that I might have inculcated as an individual while studying architecture and city planning, which with some level of top up, polishing, reskilling, could be well utilized in a different context. So there is this transferability of skills that one has, and therefore the role going forward would be to identify those transferable skills and prepare an individual for that. Now, coming to this particular question of how will educational institutes prepare people for lifelong learning, here again there are two parts to this question. First part, I would say that there is an attitudinal piece of it, and then there are skill sets. The attitude is that you have to constantly learn for life. So that's the growth mindset that people talk about, right? And that constant learning to adapt to changing situations is something that you need to inculcate. So as a behavior. So learning to learn is an important skill in itself. And for, again, in the given context that we are talking today is in the context of doing a particular job. Therefore, learning to learn new skills to do a job efficiently is something that needs to be inculcated. So educational institutions should probably imbibe among the learners the ability to have the resilience in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, right? The resilience, and secondly, the curiosity, the ability to learn new things as and when needed. So that's the attitudinal, the growth mindset that needs to be inculcated first and foremost, because without that, you cannot learn anything. You cannot really develop any learning journey. And the second thing is, of course, there has to be different modes through which such learning can take place. So I would rather say that probably you need to focus on micro learning credentials or micro learning opportunities to build the skill sets necessary for doing a particular job. So just in time kind of learning. So these are the two things I would say that as institutions we should be doing. So coming to our institution, Learned Skills, what we have been doing is that when we implement the skill development program, 60% of our course curriculum focuses on the domain skill at hand. And 40% of the course curriculum talks of teachers' soft skills. And today, what we have done that, with the Bachelor of Vocational Education that the government of India has brought in, allows multiple entry exits. So even if you are not, even if you are working in a particular organization, you can still, undertake a new course, enter, exit multiple times. That would help your horizontal as well as vertical mobility. So some such things organizations and institutions should be looking at, both at an attitudinal level and also at a delivery level.
Got it. So yeah, the kind of flexible learning, and I think, again, you touched on it, it's come up time and time again, two real kind of points in terms of the transferable skill sets and those soft skills. And I think, Maya, just going to you from an industry perspective, really, and I think, as industries' demands change, I guess you have two options. You either completely, transform your workforce by hiring new people, or, you look at, as Rindam said, look at what transferable skills exist already within your organization, and then how you can continue to develop them. So, in terms of that role of lifelong learning, how would you say, Hindalco has adapted to that, and what are the plans, over the next few years as that rate of changing increases?
Yeah, I think very nice question, Mike. So let me share my thoughts on this. First of all, this, as Arindam mentioned, lifelong learning is not at all a one-time exercise. It's a journey in perpetuity, lifelong and life-wide. That's a typical statement. Number one. Number two, if you look at the history, the entire industrial revolutions, that has been a success because of the learning ability and learning adaptability of workmen. Today, we keep on saying the cog in the wheel. That cog in the wheel has, slowly in the early 20th century, it moved to, the knowledge worker. Okay, knowledge worker, celebrating learning, ability to adapt to the changing needs of the industry and learn and move ahead. The knowledge worker, and today's world you find a digital worker. Okay, so that's a change which is happening. And in this context, let me tell you, there is also a challenge with not only Hindalco, any other industry will face, which is on the aging workforce. Today, I will give you an example. We are the largest aluminium production company in the world. We make aluminium. And when early days, the first aluminium plant which came up in, somewhere in UP and MP border, a place called Renukut, 1958 was the first aluminium plant installed in India. So imagine when people used to work there, and today you have second generations and third generations also working in the same unit. A lot of things has changed. So there are, people who have never been through formal education. I'm giving example of a welder because recently we completed a batch on a digital mode with a large Swiss vocational company. And let me tell you, most of them came back saying, "Sir, I have seen this happening through my father who was earlier working in the unit, and today I have done this for last 30 years, and again I will now pass it on to the next generation." So there is a challenge which we face is skills depletion, and skills depletion is a big challenge for any organization. Because imagine today if you have a very qualified welder with you and that gentleman retires and goes away, the entire knowledge, the entire tacit knowledge which I talk about will be moving away with him. So whether you're bringing a ITI or a diploma or an engineer from the fresh college, he is not going to be at that level. It will also take him ages to come to that standard. By knocking a machine, that person will tell that there is a problem. He will hear the sound of the machine running and tell that this is the problem. I can assure you, you open this, rectify this, machine will be fine. You don't need to spend dollars on that. So that's the challenge which industry has. Other one, very interestingly, the entire learning in industry, if you see, it is not only on classrooms. I will quote the Center for Creative Leadership, which has done an exhaustive study, 30 years, and they came up with that conclusion that actual learning happens on experimentation. 70, 20, 10 is the standard theoretical model where they say ki experiential, through applications on the job, situational learning is 70%. Okay, that's a big one. Number 20%, the 20% of the lot happens on a social network. Okay, not on a virtual social network like Facebook, but yes, a typical network which is there at a subcultural level in the organization. We all know in India we call it Ustad and Sagrit as a standard one. We have a Gurukul system earlier in ancient times. Here also it's same. Any person who is coming fresh, he will be assigned to a buddy. That person is working in that role for last 20 years, and he transforms that knowledge and application to the new generation. So that's one, and only 10% is formal learning. So what about training programs we keep on doing across as a repeated effort? That will only comprises of 10%. So unless and until they do it hands-on, they do it hands-on and also learn in a peer network with colleagues, with supervisors, they will not move ahead. So I think that's one important thing. Number three, I think that goes also same with industry, which Arindam mentioned about the attitude. So that's again that standard learning, unlearning, and learn. So learn, unlearn, and again relearn. That is very much applicable for industry. Sometimes what happens in industry when someone works for last 20 years, 30 years, they create a preconceived notion. I know my subject much more than anyone else. Appreciate it. But you need to also unlearn and relearn things which are required for the generation to move. A machine which was functioning very smoothly for last 20 years has gone through so many updates. So many things has happened on that machine. And in today's world, if you really want to get hands-on to that machine and know what exactly is required, you need to learn. So I think the ability of accepting that I need to learn, I need to move ahead is also crucial and extremely important in an industry context. So that's something which I would like to mention, Mike.
Wonderful, thanks. So some real pearls of wisdom, Mayok, and the no substitute for experience, I think, is certainly one that the older everyone gets, the louder you scream it. But absolutely, how do you retain those skills that someone's learned over a 25, 30-year period? How do you transfer them to the younger generation? And I think, as you rightly so, when you're talking about jobs that are, hands-on, even if they, certain aspects of those jobs become more automated in the future, you need that kind of, as it stands right now, that face-to-face contact so that you can, transfer, transfer those skills. And as you rightly touched on, some of them you can't do in a virtual world. When you knock on a machine and know what's right and wrong, it doesn't necessarily come from a handbook. So I think some kind of real valid points there. And you also touched, I guess, in terms of that 70-20-10, and I'm kind of keen to get your point of view, Manish, because really what we're talking about is 70%, or should I say 10% comes from that formal learning, and 70% is situational. So what role do you see that recognition of prior learning or RPL has in that?
Thank you, Mike. I think we've already well established that lifelong learning takes place all context. It's taking place at all times, all ages, right? And I think with that assumption, it's very important that we are not just focusing on how it's taking place, but how are we capturing and how are we recognizing this lifelong learning. I think it's absolutely correct that most of learning in adult life, at least, is taking place outside a training center, outside a classroom, right? It's happening on the job, it's happening in everyday life. And then I think in that context, it becomes very important, how are we capturing what this learning is? And do we have the mechanisms to actually recognize and certify this learning? Now, for certain groups of workers, this can mean a lot. For instance, and of course, especially important for India, if you see, there are almost 380 million workers in India who are informally skilled and employed, and almost 68% of those informally skilled and employed have a working experience of more than 10 years. These are official figures from the government, and that's huge. Now, what it means is a lot of them have never gone through a formal system, but the skills are there. If there is a good mechanism to recognize and certify these skills, I think that can be the difference between such workers moving to the next step in their career, significant wage enhancement as well. I think studies show that it's almost a 20% difference, those who actually have a certificate that recognizes their skills. So I think it's critical, and not to say that work hasn't gone into this recognition piece. I think a lot of work has been done by the government, by training institutions over the last 10 years. But I think what's also important, apart from assessing and certifying, is that we link these upskilling and RPL certifications with the mainstream education pathways. So one part of it is, how do you assess and certify and recognize these prior skills and learning, which can, of course, have many advantages and benefits, especially for informal workers. The other part is those who actually then develop an interest or have always had an interest to go back in some way to the mainstream education. Can they enter into a diploma course, for instance? Right now, the system is not so well integrated, to allow such certificate holders to go into an ITI diploma, for example. So that's one important aspect. Second is also from an industry perspective, I think wider acceptance for those who have such certificates. They already have the skills. They've gone through a recognition process and have acquired an RPL certificate. But are employers ready and very happy to hire people with such qualifications, or they still continue to prefer those with the legacy, the standard certifications, right? A degree or a diploma. And I think one of the things here is that can industry not just come forward to employ, but actually, if they can play a role in sharing their requirements, so they can be embedded in these assessments. Will still have millions of adult workers who have hello, can you hear me?
I think you're okay, Manish. Yeah, you carry on. You just froze for a minute, but carry on.
And I think for a lot of adult workers, they still need to rely on a adult education system. So there's a difference. Those who've acquired skills for jobs, the recognition may be a problem, but there are still millions who don't have the basic numeracy, basic language skills, basic literacy. So you still need, I think, institutions, whether schools or perhaps in this case colleges and universities, that need to educate. This is beyond skills, or this is before skills. The basic literacy for adults is equally important, and I think that needs to continue. the other aspect, maybe through a practical experience, when we say lifelong learning, we've already heard Arindam talk about the individual perspective, curiosity, the attitude that's needed to continue to learn. Of course, we have the industry view. But when we talk of employers, are they really respecting and appreciating and creating an atmosphere that encourages people to learn continuously? Now, in some cases, it could be a very important part of a job. You need new skills month on month to be able to survive and to move to the next level. But for example, I can share from personal experience that in 2013, I had already been working for a few years and I wanted to take a sabbatical and move. I was supposed to go to spend a year and a half in Germany to work at the Vocational Education and Training Institute based in Bonn. And when I made that decision, the organization didn't have a sabbatical policy. So I was ready to go. And I said, this is what I'm doing. And they were very happy. And, luckily the management was flexible and nimble. And they said, why don't you go and come back whenever you're done? But there wasn't a policy. So they were able to create one. And I went. And I can tell you that after a year and a half, I in fact came back. I was under no obligation to come back. But just the fact that this gesture of recognizing and valuing employees and to say, you've taken the next step to learn more, you will perhaps come back with new and more robust skills. We would like to have you back. And I actually did come back and I spent another 2.5 years. So I think if employers recognize, I would actually argue that it's of course important for the individual, but if the power of lifelong learning is integrated into how skills are valued, then I think it can even boost retention and actually help retain talent more. So yeah, back to you, Mike.
Absolutely. No, I think, one of the questions I wrote just as you're about to talk on in terms of a sabbatical was, do employers give people the time to learn? It often results, people want a higher salary. How do I get that? Well, I need to move jobs so that my, skills are recognized. Obviously, you often get a mismatch between people's expectations and the value that the company perceives. But I think, if you give your workforce the opportunity to learn, some examples that are well known, the likes of Google, saying, listen, it's a kind of 4-day work week and the Friday is ready for you to create your own ideas and to learn and grow and kind of bring that back to the company. So some real valid points there. Thanks, Manish. And Holger, I think, the need for lifelong learning, it is obviously serious, in terms of you will, as an individual, become out of date with the skills that you have today. I think we've already touched on the fact that certain skills that people have, maybe some of those are soft skills or leadership skills, which we touched on, I think, last week as being one of the most sought after skills in an organization. But, whereby people, of all ages and stages of life will need to upskill frequently. So just wanted to get your perspective, Holger. What are the new models or strategies, the programs that meet the specific needs of lifelong learners, and maybe you have certain ones from a tough perspective as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So, first of all, I totally agree to what was said up to this point. So this is, I think it's very important to offer or to have people, be in the right mindset, and let's say the motivation for people should be for the learner should be intrinsic and extrinsic, but intrinsic is very important at this point. And as it was mentioned, employers need to give their employees the freedom to develop themselves and also carry the mindset that learning is not something that is keeping you from working, but that it is part of the work, and that is a crucial part for business to continue. And I think this is really not something that I see right now in a lot of companies happening. I mean, there are companies, as you mentioned, Google and others that do have this mindset, but there are a lot of traditional companies that really work in another way, still in a different way. And what do you need to get to also to have this to undermine these mindsets? So the knowledge databases and the training should be available on demand, and it should not be put into a small time frame, as also was mentioned. It's really important to understand that you don't learn just anything from formal learning and then you're done, but it's also it's just the basis that can be transferred at that level, and the rest must be carried out in the during work and in peer groups and other forms of learning. That's how you really learn and also deepen your knowledge. So let me just have just a very small explanation on, or let's say a very simplistic view on what digital transformation and technologies like AI do to our work situations. Especially for TVET or other, but also for other areas, it's so what did we do? So humans have built robots, and we taught these robots to act like humans, and also for a long time we have taught humans to act like robots, and now these robots can do the work of humans, and so that's a problem because now robots do the jobs, of course not all of the jobs, and but they even can do these parts of these works more efficient and better than humans even, to some degree, and this will continue. That's definitely for sure, and we have to be clear about this, and I think everybody should be clear about this, and on each level of the company. So what do we need to do? We need to develop skills and create new jobs that robots cannot do or cannot yet do, and this is a permanent challenge that we have, and also a chance. And this just shows that this, as you said, a university degree or a starting point of a career, the things you've learned there will not suffice to make it through your whole work life career. And as you said, of course, this has been the case, let's say, for all ages, but it's a dramatic change that is it's a turning point that we have right now, that technology will be at a much faster pace to get these things going. And I think this is a very important part that is crucial for everybody to understand, and that's also why we need to offer these often platforms where you can have micro learning, and have people use the let's say to get to their knowledge or to what they need to know right at the point of need. I think this is also very, very important. It's not also necessary to have all the knowledge available at all time. And this is also what was said. You need to learn how to learn and how to get to the knowledge that you need at that point. And this is something that if you don't understand or didn't learn how to get to that knowledge, that's then that will not work for you in the future. I think this is why we need to offer platforms and also other possibilities how people can get to their knowledge at the point of need, and not have like a small time frame and say, okay, this is now you have one training, learn in that training, now you succeeded in that training, and now you have the skills. Because we all know we forget also a lot of things over time, and a lot of skills will not you will not have these skills maybe in 2 years, or you don't need these skills anymore, so you have to be trained on new skills. And that's why we have to have other measurements and other ideas to develop people and to also to deliver training and knowledge.
Yeah, and I think it links right back to what Rindam was saying at the start in terms of just-in-time learning. In the field I work in, the number of times I've turned around to people and said, why don't you, we have this wonderful thing called the internet. I almost feel like I sound old when I do it, but, have you searched? Have you looked first, how to do this if you've not done it before? And I sometimes stagger by the amount of times I get a negative response, but the ability to learn and just-in-time learning and kind of, you touched on it really there, and as did Urin. I just wanted to come back to you in terms of those bite-sized modules and micro credentialing, micro learning. I guess two questions. One, do you think that's an effective way in which to train, for example, learners? And the second point, which I think is linked to what Manish was saying in terms of acceptance when we talk about RPL, but do you think those learning outcomes are recognized adequately? Arindam, I don't know if you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I think, so with respect to the micro credentials, you see, if I understand the question correctly, is that whether these credentials are being adequately recognized, and second, as to how do you build those micro credentials, etc. So again, I would rather link it to the transferability skills, etc. So today in the universe, there may be X number of jobs that you do, and those X number of jobs would require certain Y number of activities to be performed, right? Sum total of those activities across things would lead to, competencies would lead to that particular job being done. Now, the most important thing is that for redefining the job roles within an organization, if I'm talking in the context of an organization, redefining the job roles in an organization. And when I say redefining the job roles, it would mean redefining the competencies within those job roles and the necessary activities to be done. Now, this is on one side. On the other side, if you're trying to reskill your employees for that particular job role, again, there could be a similarity score. So people would be having certain set of competencies. What all competencies match those existing or those new job roles need to be identified, and wherever those competencies need to be polished, upgraded, need to be done. So it's an exercise that can be done. So you establish similarity scores between existing and new job roles. And then people in existing job roles have a greater probability of being adaptable to the new job role with higher similarity score, right? So that's an exercise that needs to be done. Now, coming to the next question, whether recognition of prior learning is adequately recognized, of course, the answer is, I think, yes and no. It could be recognized in pockets, but may not be recognized across the industry. And secondly, also in this particular context, the micro credentials, the skill sets being recognized across the premium on, there's a question I found on the chat box, the premium on skilling, whether that is adequately recognized or not. But this is something that industries have to start understanding. So at an organization level, I would like to give an example. We were working with McKinsey Social Initiative on a project called Generation. So we were their training partners. And the objective of that particular initiative was to demonstrate to the industry that there is a significant return on investment if you invest in the training of your workforce. So one has to look at it on a life cycle cost basis. And therefore, there is there is significant return. And the industry must understand today or tomorrow, they would understand that the cost of not investing in skilling in a skilled resource or in skilling a resource, is much higher. So therefore, the return on investment on skilling and recognizing a skilled resource needs to be demonstrated to the industry. And I believe it's a matter of time the industry would start moving towards that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arindam. And we've got, we always have some questions that we want to cover in terms of each of the topics. And I've got 2 or 3 questions from the audience today. We're also live on YouTube and Facebook. And I really wanted to cover them. We often run out of time because I think we kind of, going at a pace, but it's really for you, Mayuk. So one of our audience members today, George, has said, and it really segues very nicely in terms of what you were talking about, Arindam, in terms of, recognizing employers. So it's a question to you, Mayuk. So how can industry recognize both older employees are valuable? Speaking with many friends and contacts in India, I've been informed that companies state it's their policy not to hire older people. These are people in the age of 35, which I think in the context of India, obviously having such a young population seems old, but is this normal practice or a reflection of having a large number of younger people that can be hired at a cheaper cost? And this is their personal experience consulting in the India space for many years. So I just wondered if you could share a kind of Hindalco point of view on that one.
Sure.
Thanks very much for the question, George.
Very interesting question, Mike, and I think this is predominant there in a context like India. Let me give you an example. We are a very old legacy company. Okay, we have a legacy of more than 70 years now. So obviously, we have an average age of 40, 42 in the organization. Okay, and our challenge is other way around. While we have the best in class, our handyman, the operators, the people who can do things with their hands and application of mind, they are depleted. There's a depletion. So a case in point here is that while we want to retain our workman, so the issue is that when they retire, the skills goes off. So obviously it has to be passed on to the new generation. That is one. Number 2, we do hire laterals, okay, as any other organization at certain level, managerial level, and even at supervisor level, we do hire workmen. But yes, it is basis the requirement of a particular location. So, for example, if it is a brownfield project, okay, you already have a team which will shift and do the things. If it is a greenfield project, then you will look for a combination of existing as well as new generation to work together. Because obviously you can't run a plant of thousands of crores only with new people who have no knowledge prior of the actions, right? So we will combine, and we tend to combine skills. So there will be a blend of new entry-level workforce as well as existing people moving from one unit to other, bringing the skills together with them to ensure that the work which has been given is done. So I think that's the way we work. But yes, it is a bonding issue in India context. Obviously, we are a large workforce, and hiring should be encouraged at a level where you don't only discriminate only through the age. It can be looked at on the skills, and I think that's a work which government should look at. How do you leverage and how do you market such workers to industry? I think that's a way also I will look at. So that's my point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a real balance, right? I've worked in India myself for sort of 6-7 years now, and I see people coming into the workforce and they want 25% year-on-year hike in their salary, and I get why in the context of the start point, but it also becomes a challenge, when they do increase to a certain level and they expect the same level of hike, and there's that. Okay, what is the value there from an industry perspective, and to try and find that balance. And I think as we've touched on, if you can continue to develop your workforce and provide them with skills so they continue to add more value back to the organization, then it definitely works. But also that balance of ensuring that the industry that is for profit is able to get the margins that are required. So certainly I can see both sides of it from that perspective. I think I am conscious of time, and we've got one or two more questions that maybe we can get through. It's really to you, Holger. So I don't know who this has come from, but thank you. So it says, what kind of earn while you learn models are feasible for an Indian context? And the question is really, have there been any examples internationally that could be adopted to suit Indian conditions? So I know you're based in Germany, Holger, and I know there's the dual system, and I'm sure you've obviously come through the German education system yourself. I just wonder, are you aware of any of those earn while you learn models that you think can work in the Indian context as well?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that in detail, and I don't. So sorry if if I cannot really really get to the point of that question. So the idea is, but we have of course some experience with Indian companies, and we are also based in India with the Rhineland Academy, and so I have some experience on that side from and on that level, and I can see, for example, that we have a lot of trends now working with VR, for example, virtual reality, where you can have can have a lot of you can adapt some really practical skills you can learn. And I have this experience, and it was like that one of these experiences that really opened my eyes for VR in that sector is that you have probably like you have a machine, and you can use an industry machine, and you see it in front of you, and of course, as Mayuk pointed out, you cannot hear, you cannot touch it, you cannot hear really the let's see the real nature of that machine, but you have an idea of the working steps that you need to do. So you can teach in the first level, you teach how people can use that machine. So first do this, next do that, and then press that button and put it there, and things like this. And you can practice this. And then the next step, you can do it on your own, and then you start practicing it. And I think what that really helps, because it speeds up the time you need to learn on that machine, and probably it also can help to as you said, to have some knowledge, contain knowledge about things, to put it into those trainings. Of course, you cannot, as I said, all the other experience you cannot have with that, but it helps. Once you get to that machine, you already know what that machine does, what you can do, and then you first have the experience. Okay, how hard is it really to press this button, or how to handle things? That's something you will learn at that point only. But a lot of things also, when it comes to safety and things like that, you can practice a lot of things, fire safety, so all these things can be done by these VR things, and I think this is also really good adaptation to learning.
Thanks very much, Holger, and sorry for just putting you on the spot there. I think I guess the message there is in terms of flexible learning and the ability. So if you are doing a particular role and looking for new opportunities, there are different ways in which you can learn nowadays. And as you touched on, in terms of VR, you can go through all the health and safety, you can go through all the kind of theory of it, so that when you actually come to a real world environment, you've really shortened that learning journey. And then obviously you can get recognized from a certification perspective. I'm really kind of I'm sorry today, because I think we've run out of time. I know we always try and keep it to an hour. I know everyone has commitments, both the audience that we have available and the panelists as well. I think that we obviously cover some kind of very big topics when you look at the role of lifelong learning and opportunities. And hopefully we can cover some more of them in detail as we go through. I think this is certainly something that we could talk about probably for another 2 or 3 hours. Maybe there'd just be the 5 of us. Hopefully we'd have an audience. But I would like to say, you know, kind of bring together just some of the takeaways for today. And I think, you know, so one of the things I always remind myself, you know, the learn, unlearn, and relearn, and kind of keep yourself fresh. I think one of the things I got told early on was give all your ideas away, and then you have to find new ones. So you know, it kind of keeps it refreshing. You know, the ability to learn, and I think that's one of those foundation skills. Yes, you know, you've got the core reading, writing, science, but do kind of the next generation, do they come out with the tools, the skill sets that they continue to learn off their own back? We touched on those different modes of learning, and Olga, you mentioned VR, just-in-time learning, so learning the skills that you need today, and then obviously getting those recognized through things like micro-credentialing and getting them connected. One of the questions we didn't get round to today was a question around the skills premium. You know, does industry recognize that, and how do you encourage employers to pay this skills premium? So apologies for not getting around to that question. And you know, it's fascinating. I always find it fascinating getting from the industry perspective. And I think, you know, when you're talking about a company the size of Hindalco with the 70-20-10, that role, and you know, another topic, it's all right, experimentation. You know, how do you get innovation through experimentation and some of the mistakes? You know, situational learning, peer learning. You know, one of the things that we're doing in terms of Certif-ID is bringing together, if you want, a social network for the TVET sector. You know, how can that translate to the real world in terms of peer network? How can you use those digital channels, those digital platforms to really enhance and support that learning? You know, and facilitate that through all the different modes, whether it's desktop, laptops, or smartphones that exist. And then some really valuable points from Manish in terms of, you know, the numbers are always staggering in India, but 380 million, you know, workers in the informal sector. How do you recognize those skills and really bring value? And, you know, a 20% uplift in salary is no small amount. So how can you recognize those skills and get them recognized by industry? So I'd just like to finish by saying thank you very much to all of the panelists today. Look forward to speaking to you all in the future, hopefully doing something in terms of face-to-face, but also I think, you know, the great thing in terms of the online, the combination, if you want, is that we're able to do these and bring in speakers from different countries at different times. So thank you very much to you all. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Arindam, Manish, and Maya.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone on all the different channels who joined us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.